What is the most horrifying historical event no one is talking about? The harrying of the North, when William the Conqueror wiped out or displaced 75% of the population of northern England. Not historical, but no one talks about Sudan at all. The recent massacre in El Fasher was barely a blip on anyone's radar. For me, it's the bombing of Laos and Cambodia. I know it's known by most people, but most discourse I hear about it is how it went against wartime procedure, and not about its indiscriminate targeting of civilian areas, nor how people are dying still today from unexploded ordnances, and how the US has done the bare minimum in 50 years to solve the problem it made. Not to mention the butterfly effect it caused regarding the Khmer Rouge. Rot in hell, Kissinger. Bangladesh genocide in 1971, somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million people died, and a whole lot of raping. Unit 731 Human experiments. Horrific wartime experiments on civilians. The Belgian colonization of the Congo by King Leopold II. Horrific acts were committed to force the Congolese population to harvest rubber. Tens of thousands of amputations. Severed hands were used as currency. An estimated 10 million Congolese were killed. The Holodomor is one a lot of people still don't know much about. Millions of Ukrainians starved in the 1930s under Soviet policies, and whole villages just disappeared. It's one of those events that feels almost impossible to fully process when you read about it. The Armenian genocide is often overlooked but incredibly devastating. Babi Yar. China's re-education of wires that is happening to this day isn't historical, but it's horrifying and no one is talking about it. The rape of Nanking, China, 1937. It was one of the most violent atrocities ever committed in the 20th century. In 1937, the Japanese Imperial Army invaded China and looted, pillaged, murdered, raped, and killed men, women, and civilians. Over 100,000 to 300,000 people died. It was horrible. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre. The Turkish genocide in Armenia, expulsion of Christians, is well known. However, the equivalent expulsion of Muslims from Greece is rarely talked about. Over 400,000 people forcibly removed and stripped of their nationality. And most of these were not even ethnic Turks, but rather ethnically Greek instead. The Herero and Nama genocide is in modern-day Namibia is thought by many historians to be where the Nazis got the idea of concentration camps in the Holocaust from. Don't know, but maybe the sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff? Everyone talks about the Titanic, but this one was even worse. Taiping Rebellion, Chinese Civil War. 1850 to 1864, 20 to 30 million dead. Bloodiest war of the 19th century. Honestly, to me the Volhynia and Eastern Galicia massacres are one of those World War II-era horrors that barely get talked about outside Poland and Ukraine, which is kind of insane given the scale of it. From 1943 to 1945, Ukrainian nationalist forces, especially the UPA, carried out what was basically an ethnic cleansing campaign against Polish civilians. The aim was basically wiping out Poles from whole villages, and the brutality was just hard to wrap your head around. Villages were often hit. For me, it's the 731 Japanese unit. What happened to the Taino people in the 40 years after Columbus's contact? 90% of the population was wiped out. Mothers kill themselves and their infants because there was no hope for the future. The Spanish cutting up infants and feeding them to dogs. Taino being hanged to death over open flames. Bartholomew de las Casas wrote about his first-hand accounts visiting the Caribbean and witnessing these atrocities. It was used to appeal to the Spanish court to give the indigenous people their so. The plague of Justinian is awfully disturbing, as is the Black Plague, from a disease that still poses a threat to humanity today. Feds moving Aleutians from their homes to camps in another part of AK in World War II. When they got back, their homes had been destroyed by US troops. Georgian genocide is pretty less known, along with Armenian and Circassian genocide. Probably things like Herxheim, where they found remains of 1,000 people that were killed and eaten. No one is talking about it since it happened about 7,000 years ago, but it must have been pretty horrific when it happened. I was just talking about this today in a conversation with a friend. I remember having a conversation when ISIS was doing all the crazy shit, and people were so traumatized by what they were doing, which admittedly was absolutely horrific. But I kept thinking about how the Germans murdered 33,000 Jews in one weekend in Ukraine. I don't think anybody really knows that that's not heavily into World War II history. The Tulsa Race Massacre gets almost no emphasis at all when it comes to the horrors of American racism.